Honestly, it feels like it's been forever, far too long, since I last featured this StarCraft 2 matchup on the YouTube channel. So what I've got for you today is a best of 3 series between the 2 highest ranked Protoss players from the European server. Now in game number 1 we find ourselves on the map Babylon, and playing here with the blue Protoss probes we have none other than MaxPax. And his opponent in the opposite corner with the red Protoss pieces, he goes by the name of ShoWTimE. I noticed, I mean it's been a little while at the very least, but I noticed that most of the time whenever I feature a Protoss versus Protoss, for some reason the video gets like, I don't know, a third, maybe half of the amount of views that normal videos usually get? Not exactly sure. It seems like a lot of people aren't necessarily the biggest fans of PvP, but you know what? I like it, so I'm gonna go ahead and cast it. That being said, I am gonna be a little bit rusty when it comes to this particular matchup. Of course, I've seen many games recently, but not quite as many as, say, for example, Zerg vs. Terran, because it seems that basically all of the best games of StarCraft that have been played lately, for some reason, it seems like basically all of them are Zerg vs. Terran. Quite a bit of Protoss versus Terran as well, a little bit of Zerg versus Protoss. For some reason, though, the mirror matchups right now, not the most popular games. I mean, we see quite a bit of TVT. The thing about Terran versus Terran is that it kind of just ends, oftentimes, within, like, you know, the first few minutes of the game, and really the same can be said for Zerg versus Zerg as well. Zerg versus Zerg also has a tendency to end very early when, well, one of the players makes a mistake, and because of that, I don't really feature it as often on the YouTube channel either. Now, I've been told that this particular Protoss versus Protoss is not your average game of Protoss versus Protoss. The thing about the mirror matchups in general is if both players are making the exact same units, right? And in Protoss versus Protoss, for example, if both players are making a bunch of Stalkers, and one guy ends up losing one of the Stalkers, he will basically end up losing the game because the opponent is immediately gonna attack, right? Especially in Protoss versus Protoss. I mean, Protoss in general doesn't have nearly as many early game units available as the other races in StarCraft do. Like, you'll have way more Zerglings than you'll ever have Zealots early on, so the margin for error is tiny, and therefore a lot of games just simply end very early on. Anyways, I heard that this particular series is a banger, and it's no surprise because, well, MaxPax, he's stepped into some very big shoes, okay? Historically speaking, I think it's safe to say that ShoWTimE is the best European Protoss player. He's been playing this game for over a decade, he's been incredibly good, and whereas other Protoss players have come and gone, ShoWTimE is still a top-tier contender. MaxPax, of course, I mean, relatively new. I mean, I say relatively. He's been playing this game at a high level for quite a long time right now. I mean, I'm fairly sure that since MaxPax started playing this game at a high level, other esports have come and gone, like the entire esports scene. But, you know, when it comes to StarCraft 2, MaxPax is still a quote-unquote newcomer. Even though, you know, you gotta put a little asterisk right next to that. He is currently the highest ranked Protoss player in the world on Aligalek. But of course, he doesn't play offline tournaments, so gotta take all of that with a grain of salt. Anyways, both players going for the low ground expansion here. We're gonna see both of them go for a Stargate opener as well. ShoWTimE, however, has decided to go for the Phoenix. He's seen that his opponent decided to go for a Stargate, whereas MaxPax also saw the same thing. MaxPax, however, is gonna try and get lucky. Oracles, of course, are a air-to-ground unit only. ShoWTimE sees the Phoenix right now, or, well, he sees it with his Phoenix, and there really shouldn't be a lot of damage coming out of this Oracle. It's gonna try and dive into the mineral line, but there's already a shield battery set up. I think recalling, indeed, is your best call. Okay, MaxPax keeps it alive, but now we're in that very awkward state of Protoss versus Protoss. Okay, so this is something that really only happens in the mirror matchups. This is probably one of the strangest interactions in all of StarCraft 2. The thing about Phoenixes is that they can move and shoot at the same time, right? So they can move and shoot at the same time. It's a very unique ability in StarCraft 2. I guess in the Wings of Liberty campaign, you've got Diamondbacks that can sort of do the same thing. You can kind of pull it off with Mutas as well if you're, well, hold position microing, right? There's some tricks to make it happen, but Phoenixes, they naturally move and shoot at the same time. So in Phoenix versus Phoenix wars, is usually the guy with more Phoenixes that ends up winning. If you don't want to disengage, it's basically impossible for your opponent to force that to happen. So oftentimes, the guy with more Phoenixes will end up winning, which is why we see both players right now adding on another Stargate. The awkward part about Phoenixes, though, is that they're not really... I mean, they can obviously lift up units, but they can't kill structures. So they can't really actually push for the win necessarily. It's very tempting in these sort of scenarios to try and make a switch towards another army. So, of course, you do have, for example, Archons. Archons cannot be lifted up by Phoenixes. So they would be an excellent choice to add into the mix, and they would certainly be able to catch the opponent off guard. But what we've really settled on in the meta over the years of Protoss versus Protoss is that the guy with more Phoenixes usually ends up winning. The Fleet Beacon is coming up right now for MaxPax. This is always a little bit of a risky structure to make because it's incredibly expensive. I believe it's 300 minerals, 200 gas. There's an upgrade in the Fleet Beacon called the Anion Pulse Crystals that allows your Phoenixes to get 2 additional range. And obviously when you get additional range with your Phoenixes, you're going to have a much easier time fighting your opponent's Phoenixes, but it's going to cut into your current Phoenix production for a little while. Ultimately though, I guess in the end, what you're really aiming for is that carrier production. That would be very nice to have, but we're still a while away from it. Okay, so 5.5 minutes into the game, we've got the Anion Pulse Crystals coming up right here from MaxPax. He does have less Phoenixes, but his upgrades are going to be a little bit quicker. The same can be said here, though, for ShoWTimE. In about a minute or so from now, he's going to be a bit behind on that upgrade, so there will be a timing window where MaxPax can try and get a bit of value. Now, you got to be very careful maneuvering around the map, because like I said, if you get caught in an engagement, disengaging is basically impossible. So that's why we do have some spotter units over here. MaxPax with a pylon, pretty far forward, trying to make sure that he sees exactly what's happening. He wants to make sure that he does not get caught with his pants down. Third Nexus coming up here as well for the Danish player. Same can be said right now for the German, who has also planted down another Nexus. Now, he's maneuvering around this map, MaxPax that is, as if he got the superior Phoenix numbers, but he really doesn't. We've got a stasis ward over here set up in the main base, but I think we need to keep the camera right here on these Phoenixes. MaxPax does have the Anion Pulse Crystals right now, so he does have a little bit more range. You can see that right here with the purple beams. Still, though, ShoWTimE is getting dangerously close. He's flying over. Ooh, that shield battery. Almost enough Phoenixes right now here to one-shot it. And despite the fact that MaxPax had smaller Phoenix numbers originally, he ended up killing 3 of his opponent, and therefore he's now managed to even up the score. Another big thing, of course, is going to be those cybernetics core upgrades. There's some air upgrades in the cyber core that, well, will make these engagements a whole lot better as well. But both players really just doubling down on the Phoenix production. We've got ourselves a third Stargate here coming up as well for MaxPax. Both players prioritizing the gases over at their third Nexus again as well, just for that Max Phoenix, or that Mass, well, I guess I said Max Phoenix. I guess Max Phoenix is about as descriptive as Mass Phoenix as well, because both of these guys are just trying to make 1 unit each. This is not super common though in PvP. I mean, it happens from time to time. It's kind of like Muta versus Muta and Zerg versus Zerg. It happens, but it's not necessarily the go-to. So if you haven't seen Protoss versus Protoss in a while, this is not what every single game looks like, okay? There's usually quite a bit of dancing going on with some early game units. Obviously, Blink Stalker are amazing, but when both players go for a Stargate opener and both of them decide to go into the Phoenix production, this is where you end up in a very awkward state. So both of them are trying to clump up the Phoenixes as well. This has a couple different functions. First and foremost, you hide the amount of Phoenixes that you have, right? That's obviously very nice. But secondly, you can also make sure that all of your Phoenixes start firing all at the same time. Okay. So the only time you can see a disengage happening is when both players decide to back up. That's the only time you can really force a disengage. If one of the players wants to continue fighting, they'll continue fighting. The thing is, both players are trying to be greedy here. Third Stargate coming up. There's the +1 air weapons coming up for MaxPax, who's now going into that carrier production. So, since they both now have triple Nexus economy, it's about time we see some higher tier units as well, but it's still very dangerous. This can still go awfully wrong. Okay. Nexus here coming up. Is it time? What's funny is that usually you have a build-up for, like, you know, however long it takes until the first engagement, and then the big engagement between the Phoenixes ends in like, 10 seconds? They're not quite Banelings or Scourge, I suppose, right? When it comes to flying units, but the fights can happen very quickly. Okay, well, I guess this is the moment right over here. Who has got the bigger numbers? I don't know. I mean, I can open up the units tab right over there in the top left, but for the players at this point, it is basically impossible to gauge exactly how the engagement is going. ShoWTimE chasing down the carrier here. You see he's got a lot of range. Now the Phoenixes are joining in the fray again as well. Those interceptors are soaking up a couple hits. But for now though, this game is very, very even. Fourth Nexus coming up here up north from MaxPax. ShoWTimE going for the more conventionally positioned one over here, but it honestly doesn't really matter all too much. Alright, Guardian Shields would certainly not be a bad call. Shield batteries, of course, also very helpful, but there's a lot of damage coming out of these units in a short amount of time, so it's really difficult to actually force the engagement and then, you know, get the healing that you're looking for. These situations are very tense, though. It's very easy to just mess up and then, you know, not get the engagement you're looking for. ShoWTimE now also mixing in one of his own carriers here, just to try and get that nice big tanking unit out, and of course, MaxPax planting down another pylon here. I was gonna say, that's a little overly ambitious. It's difficult though, the Phoenixes can't kill it, right? Guess that's where the carrier is nice as well, together with that sentry. Anyways, the pylon over here, it's gonna be a nice spotter unit. Yeah, it's gonna take forever to kill the rocks, but you honestly don't really need it. Okay, ooh, ShoWTimE apparently has decided that he wants to just go for the counterattack. He could definitely decide to just defend at home, but he's decided to go for the counterattack and lift up his entire, well, mineral line here. That is 14 probes down the drain in just a second. Same thing happening right now in the natural expansion of ShoWTimE. So both players here are not entirely sure about the situation. Obviously, if you can get on top of the Stargates, that is absolutely amazing as well. But both players are unsure about this particular game, so rather than committing to a fight, both of them decide to go for the counter-attack instead. And this is where an awkward game gets even more awkward. All of those workers are gonna die if the probes, well, fly into the sky. They will certainly get picked off. It's just that you also don't really want to waste all of your energy, right? So they're patrolling right here on top of the Stargates, with the idea being that, of course, you can pick up those Phoenixes as they pop out of the production structures. At this point, though, the carrier here, there's not a whole lot of them, but they are decent here at shutting down the pylons and therefore shutting down the production. So hey, if you haven't seen a lot of Protoss versus Protoss recently, welcome back. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comment section of this video. I feel like this game is pretty descriptive. Alright, Stormgate, ShoWTimE here. For some reason, he's in Clan Stormgate. That's what he's been in for a while. Although I believe he's actually part of Berlin International Gaming. Big. Anyways, don't quote me on that. He's decided to go for a bunch of pylons over here in the top right-hand corner, as he's proxying a bunch of Stargates. MaxPax has returned back home, however. At this point, the Phoenix numbers, yeah, are still in favor right here of the Danish player. Couple additional units pop out of the Stargates as well, which is a little bit awkward, but I think right now may be the moment where, yeah, MaxPax can force the issue. That being said, ShoWTimE, yeah, he can recall and get on out of there, but GG is cold. After one of the most uncomfortable games of StarCraft 2 that I've seen over the last couple weeks, it is MaxPax who obtains the victory in game number 1. Alright, next up we find ourselves on the map Neo-Humanity. Now maybe this game will be a little bit more quote-unquote normal. We've got ShoWTimE, however, okay, going across the map. He's now building his second pylon, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's his second pylon on the other side of the map. I mean, for Protoss versus Protoss, this is not too strange. This is something you see very frequently. Even when you're not necessarily planning on going for a proxy, I would imagine though that ShoWTimE in this particular game is going for a proxy. It's still kind of nice to not build that pylon inside of your main base. Okay, it's got to be a proxy Stargate right next to the natural and the main base here of MaxPax, who's also going for a Stargate of his own. There's no way he can make Mass Phoenix out of this one over here, though. Anyways, the thing is, MaxPax has been looking around the main base of the player in red. He was counting pylons. He certainly knows at which point that second pylon should go down, and he hasn't seen it. Now he's going to spot the proxy. And he'll see that it's going to be a Stargate. Okay. Low ground wall off right here for MaxPax. This is something he's very fond of and something that he honestly puzzled out. A lot of Protoss players opt to go for this particular start, which ShoWTimE has gone for over here with the double gateway. This is what we saw for years and years and years as the go-to in PvP. And it still is one of the most popular builds, but MaxPax is the type of guy who figures out how to get away with one less, well, I was going to say barracks, one less gateway. One less Protoss barracks, and still stay alive. Alright. Let's see. Do we have enough? Oracle gets cancelled. Apparently ShoWTimE has decided no, we do not have enough. This was an excellent catch right here for MaxPax. And also a pretty decent example as to why we don't necessarily see these proxy Stargates as often. The thing is, when the opponent does go for a probe scout, so with a single gateway, going for a probe scout, of course, is not a bad idea. When you see that your opponent is lacking a pylon in the main base, it's much easier to figure out what's going on your side of the map as well. That being said though, even though ShoWTimE's proxy got shut down, he does actually manage to get, well, 2 adepts in. Luckily, there's already Phoenixes available here for MaxPax, who's apparently happy to play the exact same game that we just saw once again. Okay, good position though, of course, for MaxPax. His expansion is faster, he shut down his opponent's tech, and he really hasn't lost a whole lot yet at this point in the game. Now it's gonna be he who can decide the pacing of it, right? He's gonna start sending his units across the map. There's a shield battery coming up here on the low ground for ShoWTimE as well, but these Phoenixes are real nice. You can lift up and take a couple of these units out of the equation, but still, of course, even when the unit is lifted up into the air, the shield battery can still be used right there for base healing and for unit healing as well. Okay, couple probes. But that's what we're going to settle on for now. ShoWTimE is going to be forced into a very defensive game here. Blink is coming up. Obviously, when that upgrade finishes, he may very well decide to get a little bit more adventurous. But generally speaking, I think it's ShoWTimE, yeah, who is pretty happy to just play this very defensive game, right? It's something that he likes to do. People call him the Mauer for good reason. He's very well known for his defensive play, and he'll be forced into it. Now, what exactly is the follow-up going to be right here for MaxPax? He's still sprinkling in more and more of these Phoenixes, but he started to make the transition right here towards the Robo facility as well. So a lot of mid-games in Protoss versus Protoss are Stalker-based. A lot of players want to opt to go for that Stalker-based army just because they're incredibly mobile and they're a solid jack-of-all-trades type of unit, right? You can't really go wrong making Stalkers in this matchup, but the one natural enemy of the Stalker is, of course, the Immortal. Immortals deal a lot of damage to armored units. In general, they absolutely plow through Stalkers, so it's definitely not a choice that is too surprising here for MaxPax, but it does make this game a lot more complex, right? He's playing a unit composition that is, well, making up a variety of units, whereas ShoWTimE is basically just going for one type of unit only. Third Nexus coming up here. Obviously, with a more mobile army, that is always a choice, and I wouldn't be surprised here if MaxPax is also going to be going for a third Nexus here momentarily. Although he has added on the Twilight Council together with the Forts too. So yeah, just opting to go for a bunch of Immortals for now. Make sure that he's safe at home, and we'll probably see him expand behind it momentarily. Okay, now the Phoenixes up to this point have killed 5 probes. There's nothing really all too crazy. It's not really anything to write home about. Not until those Stalkers leave the main base can MaxPax really get work done. I mean, he can lift up a couple. Phoenixes are relatively tanky units. But yeah, it's a little tricky. If he doesn't want to be attacked there, he's gonna have to, okay, a couple of Adepts over here being annoying. But he's gonna have to recall those units. Indeed, he does send them all the way back home. Otherwise, you have to basically right-click in that top left-hand corner every couple seconds until the Phoenixes glide out once again and they start spreading out a little bit more. Okay, so rather than playing the heavy eco game here, MaxPax has already decided to go for the Dark Shrine as well. So he does have a third Nexus coming up, but all things considered, it is a little bit late. +1 ground weapons here coming together with the charge. So this is a good example of a different unit composition, right? In a mirror matchup. So in a way, this is kind of like Roach Ravager going up against Mutaling Bane, or for example, Terran Bio going up against Terran Mech. That happens all the time. This is the Protoss versus Protoss equivalent. So this is a Immortal Archon-based unit composition right here with Phoenixes for support for now, going up against a much more gateway-heavy approach. So this is a lovely catch right here for ShoWTimE. Shutting down that vision over there is very, very nice. That's why the Observer was hanging out over here. Okay. Proxy Stargate. Took forever to kill. The probe apparently was tasked with, I think it's this probe, right? It was tasked with damaging that Stargate for at least a while. But now it's gonna be MaxPax who gets to decide the pacing of this game for a little bit longer. He's gonna try and get some work done with this Prism over here while simultaneously moving forward here with the Phoenixes. The Immortals would certainly be nice in a straight-up battle. Dark Templar coming up as well. So they're gonna be building over here on the left side of the map. Can he drop one of the DTs off in the main base, whereas this one over here is gonna go into the third? I think that's the plan. Phoenix is right now also waiting for all of these Stalkers to group together. At this point, yeah, okay, nice body blocking right here. Lovely body blocking here. Very nicely done. There is a Dark Templar over here as well. Observer is going to have to run on over in this direction, or fly on over, I guess, in this direction. There's still a lot of units though, just constantly being annoying. And despite the solid micro here, there's not really that much detection. Like, this observer is rather slow. We do have a second observer available, but it also was not quite in the right spot. So in the end, 14 probes have gone down in total, but you can see that this is not really game-ending damage, right? By any stretch of the imagination. Fourth Nexus coming up right now for ShoWTimE. Templar Archives also coming up to try and make sure that he can actually make Dark Templar and High Templar into those Archons. I mean, Storm is obviously an option too, but usually not that common in this particular matchup. It's just that a lot of these Protoss units have a lot of HP. Did he just get the Prism? Yeah. Okay, so he just shut down the Prism here successfully. That will make life a little bit more comfortable right here for the German Protoss. Okay. Both players transitioning towards the +2 upgrades. MaxPax has also decided to go for his own Nexus over here on the right side. Alright, now ShoWTimE is apparently, with the Prism gone, with the Phoenixes off his back. Apparently right now he's feeling a little bit more adventurous to go across the map. Obviously though, there's a slow zone over here. There's a bunch of rocks as well that slow down those attack paths quite a bit. And this is apparently the moment where MaxPax is also going for an engagement. Now he sees this army. Okay, he decides to commit with his Zealots only, but he's moving the rest of his units back. Makes a lot of sense because he wants to try and protect his fourth base. That being said though, these units are pretty fast, but not fast enough to catch up with these Stalkers. Zealots over here are getting pushed back. ShoWTimE keeps his base alive, but he still, MaxPax it is, manages to jump on top of his army before the Nexus falls. Maybe the shields are gone, but they will regenerate. Nice little bit of micro here though, coming out of ShoWTimE. With the Immortals, though, joining the fray, I think it's about time for the German Protoss here to back up, although he does decide to stay around for a little bit longer. I mean, he wants to shut down the Phoenixes, and he does successfully do that, but it's gonna come at the cost of quite a few of those Stalkers. Zealots over here on the left side of the map, once again moving in for more, but okay. Yeah, it's 14 Stalkers that have gone down in total in this game. I don't think that's quite ideal here. That is more damage here than MaxPax should have been able to do. And obviously he's got the higher quality army, right? So if you can see the player with the higher quality army taking that supply advantage, it's pretty clear that he's in a good position. High Templar being morphed in as well. We're gonna make those into Archons. Archons are a fantastic unit against the unit that usually comes next for ShoWTimE. And that would be the Zealot with Charge. Archons are very good at taking the brunt of the damage, but also dealing splash damage to the units in front. And MaxPax is feeling confident right now. Now this concave here is absolutely phenomenal though for ShoWTimE, getting a lot of his Stalkers to shoot, whereas MaxPax is kind of derping around with some of the units in the back. Nexus over here in the middle of the map did get cancelled. That's where the Zealots came in. Okay, ShoWTimE is going to have to defend to the best of his abilities. Not a very sophisticated unit composition, but apparently MaxPax has decided, yeah, that choke point over here is just not ideal, so he decides to back off. He did build another Nexus of his own here as well in the meantime. Nexus coming up here as well for ShoWTimE in the same location. You can see that this Stalker-based army just doesn't really do the trick anymore. Like, they're a good unit comp to have initially, right? They're definitely a unit that gets stronger with upgrades as well, but it does kind of lose a bit of value over time. Another option here for ShoWTimE, of course, would be to transition towards Disruptors if he can get there, but it's expensive and it takes a while before you actually arrive at that unit comp. Alright. War Prism filled up with a bunch of Zealots, ready to maybe go into the natural expansion. Okay, that's one of the Immortals getting targeted down. Nice little bit of Blink Stalker control. A little bit of an overextension right there by MaxPax. Loses 2 Immortals while basically dealing no damage. Battery overcharge on top of that Photon Cannon will keep this thing alive. And this also means that MaxPax gets shut down in the natural expansion of the Protoss. So that's actually really nice right here by ShoWTimE. Getting 2 Immortals while simultaneously shutting down the drop. If he could get the Prism, that would really seal the deal, but not going to happen. Shadow Strike now, researching on the side of MaxPax. That's going to be the Dark Templar Blink ability. Yeah, and despite the good trades over the last few minutes, I'm not really liking this position for ShoWTimE all too much. Yeah, Stalkers are nice, but in a head-on engagement, there is no way that this army in red is going to win. That's why he's tiptoeing around the opponent's army for the most part, right? Just trying to take little parts here and there. The thing is, now that ShoWTimE is, okay, going up against MaxPax, who's maxed out, Max may very well start just simply bulldozing through the center of the map and try to go after these bases. At some point, there just will not be enough space for ShoWTimE to continue running. Robo Bay coming up right now here for the Danish Protoss, together with a second Robo facility. So he's the one thinking about going into higher tier units instead. +3/+3 upgrades though, or +3/+2 upgrades rather here for ShoWTimE. On the production tab right now as well. Okay, you can see the Immortals. When they're hitting, they deal a lot of damage. Zealots here chasing down wherever they can. Photon Cannon's finishing up here as well though, and I think MaxPax, yeah, he's gonna need some reinforcements here, but I don't think he's gonna be able to get the kill on that Nexus, right? Which is what he's hoping for. Same thing can be said for ShoWTimE, of course. He needs to get a couple more units in there for the base defense. Another Immortal getting picked off. Archon over here also getting targeted. Battery overcharge is real nice, but the damage output right there of all Stalkers solo targeting, or single targeting rather, on one of those units is going to be enough to out DPS the healing right there of the battery overcharge. Another Immortal over here getting caught off guard. Okay. ShoWTimE has been fishing for Immortals for a while, and he's actually killed quite a few of them now. Not bad at all. Dark Templar over here being a nuisance. Nice bit of body blocking here once again by ShoWTimE. He wants to catch these units over here as well. I think Shadow Stride was already used, so not a whole lot he can do. Okay, at least one of them manages to get away, but that's not quite ideal. The pylon over here on the right side of the map is also going to get used, and at the very least it will force the cancel on another Nexus that ShoWTimE was trying to make. He's adding on 5 additional gateways, by the way, so he's really just doubling down on more and more gateway production. He's going to go all the way up to 13 gateways. That's going to be a lot of upgraded Stalkers, but yeah, that unit composition here from MaxPax is still getting better as the game progresses, as now he's going for the Disruptors. And Disruptors, of course, with their Purification Novas, I mean, they're maybe not the best unit against those very mobile Stalkers, but if the Stalker player is not paying attention literally everywhere, and obviously he wants to fight in multiple angles at once, it is very easy to accidentally mess up and, well, lose a bunch of your units to one Purification Nova. Once again though, ShoWTimE coming in as well from the right. He's jumping on top of these Disruptors. That's 2 of them going down, 3 of them going down as well. Battery goes down. I mean, he can just target the Nexus itself if he wants to. These are +3 upgraded Stalkers, and you can see they really pack a punch. Purification Novas are going to be coming up as well for ShoWTimE here momentarily. Who's now even going to go into the Shields upgrade too. Okay. So income-wise, MaxPax is all the way up to 100 workers, which is kind of insane. He's got about 100 army supply. Yep, there we go. 100 at the bottom of the screen. That looks cute. 100 army supply and 100 worker supply in total right now here for the Danish player. Still though, his army is much slower moving, right? So he wants to force a main engagement, but ShoWTimE is running circles around him, now engaging with a big group of Stalkers here at the bottom of the map. He may not have as many workers, he may not have as big an economy, but that means his army supply is quite a bit bigger already, and he still has some room to grow too. Fight over here in the middle of the map continues onwards as well. MaxPax trying to bowl a strike on all of those Stalkers, but so far not really happening. Okay, Zealot over there does finish one Disruptor. Nexus over there does end up going down. ShoWTimE getting some really solid trades here, man. Going for the Observer speed as well. High yield Vespian Geyser is not gonna stay alive. And yeah, he's just pointing his Stalkers to kill one single target, and it ends up falling. Now, this is a pricey one. Nexus does fall, but it did come at the cost of quite a few Stalkers as well. Already though, as he's retreating on the left, ShoWTimE is moving in on the right. He's the entire MOBA team, dude. No need to communicate with your teammates when you are the team. Brilliant stuff. Okay. So those upgrades are actually very substantial, right? So with the most recent balance patch in StarCraft 2, Blizzard made it so that these Forge upgrades are a little bit quicker to research. And it's really nice. In a lot of these types of games, you can just simply get those upgrades going a little bit quicker, and it allows a variety of unit comps. Like, eventually, of course, MaxPax will catch up, but there's gonna be literally like 10 minutes or so where ShoWTimE will be ahead in upgrades, and obviously the majority of the games, they end before he will ever be able to catch up. Still though, well, just bowling for a lucky strike there. Fair enough. There's still a lot of unit production here available for MaxPax. Maybe he's lost a couple Nexi here and there, but he's still making new ones, and he still has a good amount of money in the bank too. ShoWTimE trying to force the fight moving forward. Okay, some really nice detonations right there though from those disruptors, but there's not enough tanking right now for the disruptors as they're trying to retreat. ShoWTimE chasing down this army as it backs off to the safety of the shield batteries and the photon cannons. Now it's MaxPax who's ready to split up his unit composition. ShoWTimE forced the council right there on that nexus on the right side of the map. But MaxPax is moving forward over here in the center. Zealots as well going after the nexus that's building here on the left side of the map. Not much you can really do. Recall is going to be used though on some of that army as it does indeed keep that nexus here in the middle alive. Still though, MaxPax has already killed the nexus here on the left side. These are difficult bases to acquire in these types of games. Not really something you can just easily expand to. Okay, Dark Templar sneaking around. Yeah, ShoWTimE sees the little blur, but he doesn't have detection in the right place. That's where those upgrades are really nice. MaxPax moving forward right now, though. Not just with the Dark Templar, but also with his main army. And this now also triggers a counterattack. MaxPax may have killed a Nexus on the other side of the map, but I think ShoWTimE is trying to do the same here as well on the opposite player's side of the map. Okay, apparently it takes too long. ShoWTimE decides to retreat. MaxPax is going in for a move over here as well. The Disruptors, okay, getting some really lovely hits in. Nicely done right there by MaxPax. Trying his very best. ShoWTimE, though, is still able to corner at least some of this army. ShoWTimE is making another base over here as well. This time around, the concave is not nearly as rough right here for MaxPax, although I said that at the start of that fight. I think it was pretty good, but now it's getting a little bit worse. Zealot's trying to charge into his army, but ShoWTimE blinking backwards. What started off as a pretty good fight, so there's still Dark Templar going to town everywhere. What started off as a pretty good fight, I believe, for MaxPax is now turning into a bit of a disaster. We do have one of those disruptors coming in from the high ground, trying its very best to get some work in. And I've got a feeling... Okay. Alright. Well, he's gonna be okay for now. I had a feeling it was gonna die, but... apparently my feelings, they are irrelevant. Okay, so... income advantage? Hard to say. Pretty much even at this point in the game. Army-wise, you can see, though, that what started off as a good engagement right there for MaxPax turned out to be a bit of a disaster as ShoWTimE got the upper hand in that trade. MaxPax suddenly moving around this map a lot more aggressively. He must realize at this point that his economy is not as great anymore and he doesn't have as much money in the bank compared to his opponent. Getting a nice strike over there, though, with that Disruptor, but he's still on the hunt. It's just mostly a bunch of Zealots and a whole lot of Stalkers here for ShoWTimE, but it's enough. He's target firing down all of those heavy hitters. Dark Templar, though, being used defensively. In the meantime, MaxPax also using some of them offensively as he's tearing one of the bases apart here with Dark Templar. 26 probes have already gone down. That is expensive. ShoWTimE probably felt like he could win the game if, you know, this went on for a little bit longer. He was at the very least already smelling blood in the water, but not quite the case yet, with the Nexus now also falling on top of that.
I am intrigued.
Okay. This fight has been going back and forth and back and forth. Overall, though, the army here is still substantially bigger for ShoWTimE. However, a lot of that supply right now is caught up for MaxPax's, well, economy, right? So he's running out of at least some of the mineral fields, but he still has quite a few of them available. By the way, it says 15 out of 20 over here because some of these mineral fields are counting. You don't actually want to saturate this base with full 20 workers. That sounds like a little bit too much. ShoWTimE, once again, trying to force the fight. He realizes at this point that his army must be bigger. He still has quite a bit of supply available as well to continue warping in, but every single time he's ready to go for an attack, those pesky Dark Templar show up for another engagement. ShoWTimE going for another Nexus here a little bit further up north. Double expanding, by the way, not really rebuilding the probes because he realizes it's a little bit dangerous to do so, although I wouldn't mind seeing it. I'm trying my best, by the way, to not miss any major disruptor hits, but that's another problem with Protoss versus Protoss. Tricky for me to stay on top of every single engagement, because you see these guys just... The disruptor ability is a cooldown, right? So you see them just constantly fishing for the best engagement that they can possibly get. Okay, nice hit over there. Lovely work. Stalker's over here engaging as well on the left side of the map. MaxPax actually catching some of the army here of ShoWTimE on move command. I think that's by design though, but it does allow right now ShoWTimE to go in for a move over here on the right. So the retreat on the left allowed this army over here on the right to get a really nice engagement off. Dark Templar once again being a nuisance, trying to create chaos. But in the end, StarCraft 2 is a game that is won by the guy with the bigger army. And finally, ShoWTimE's bank right now has been spent. I think this would be the moment for him to go for a big fight. I mean, they've been fighting for a long time. It's basically been non-stop action for the last 15 minutes. Ooh, careful, careful. Ooh, okay, that was really nice, of course. Getting a couple of your opponent's disruptors is huge. This Nexus over here at the top side of the map, I mean, it's been attempted many times, but it's not going to happen. ShoWTimE is gonna lose that Nexus another time. And we're now getting to the point where I guess the middle base is once again one of the options. Yeah, we're gonna start long distance mining some of it. MaxPax's economy, still really nice. But he does have more workers right now than he really can handle. So you can see that the worker count is a little bit deceiving at this point. Still though, MaxPax does definitely have the income advantage here. Especially if he manages to finish up one more of those Nexi. ShoWTimE once again on the offensive. He actually sees all of the disruptors that are left by themselves. MaxPax decides to go around the long way with the Stalkers, but he ends up losing basically all of his disruptors right there. Well, I don't want to say for free, because he still ended up sniping a lot of his opponent's army. But those are the units that are so critical at this point in the game. ShoWTimE getting a very nice snipe right there on his opponent's army. Now decides to continue fighting here as well. MaxPax apparently doesn't feel comfortable anymore to go and fight this army head-on without any of his own disruptors. So he decides to go in for the counter-attack right now too, going after one of the bases. But of course this one isn't particularly important anymore, because ShoWTimE already mined it out, although ShoWTimE is now going to go after the same one as well on his opponent's side of the map. MaxPax hunting down the natural expansion right now, trying to just pick off whatever he can. Getting the robo facilities, getting the shield batteries and the photon cannons all would be really nice. But ultimately, this army here from ShoWTimE has to be addressed. A couple Dark Templar here on the left being annoying, but there's enough detection here and enough distance as well between those photon cannons, yeah, to make that really difficult. And since MaxPax can't really take on that army of ShoWTimE anymore, and he doesn't have that great an economy, he decides to, rather than actually give his opponent the satisfaction, he decides to tap out. For some reason, man, this is something I've been hearing for years and years and years in StarCraft 2, that all that Protoss players do is just use the army hotkey and then attack move. It's like, really? Is that really all they do? I don't know, man. That previous game was pretty wild. Both players really giving us a masterclass of what is possible when you are, well, one of the very best micro players in the world. You have to be so fast. Like, you give that a try in your own games. I've tried doing that sort of playstyle many times myself, and it usually ends with one of the players, usually me, taking a big disruptor hit to the face. They're like, ah, dang it. There goes my entire army. But when you have two players that really don't take that much damage over the course of a game, both of them are just at the top of their skill level right now. I mean, you can see where these games can go. Sometimes there's still a Stargate transition as well later on. Anyways, we've got ourselves a triple gateway here. I mean, I'm assuming we're going to cancel that gate, but ShoWTimE could certainly keep it around if he wants to. Two Stalkers have already shown up on the other side of the map. It's once again MaxPax going for the single gateway approach. Using the low ground here to try and expand. We've got ourselves a Stargate opener here, once again by the Danish Protoss. Yeah, this single gateway style, it's very, very finicky. It's very easy to accidentally lose, especially on a map like Royal Blood, where you don't have that ramp leading down from the high ground to the low ground. But MaxPax is the type of guy who will play this strategy literally every single map, and it looks like the gateway. Alright, he's gonna let it, yeah, he's gonna let it finish. There's even a fourth gate coming up right now as well in the middle of the map, so ShoWTimE maybe a little bit tired as well after playing that previous game. He wants to keep this particular game, the finale in this best of 3, a little bit more simplistic. And honestly, I can't blame him. Void Ray coming up, I think that's an excellent choice. Oracle in the meantime on the other side of the map. But luckily here for ShoWTimE, he did already add on the shield battery. Absolutely critical. Only a single kill right there on that one, what's it called? The one Oracle. Okay. Now the Void Ray is out. Are we gonna go for a second Void Ray as well? I was gonna say, I think we're gonna need it. Warp Gate upgrade is gonna finish up, but ShoWTimE is basically going for the good old 1 base 4 gate all-in. There's 2 Stalkers here for ShoWTimE inside of his main base. So that's a little bit unfortunate. He really would have liked to have those on the other side of the map. There's really no way for him to get them out, but I mean, he also needs defense right here against the Oracle. So in a way, that justifies the Oracle opener entirely, right? Despite the fact that the Oracle hasn't really done any damage, it's forced more of those units from the opponent to stay in the main base, which justifies the cost entirely. Still though, yeah, that gateway is starting to lose a lot of hit points. And that's honestly half of the production right here for MaxPax. It's gonna end up going down. ShoWTimE just warping in more and more units. Of course, MaxPax does have the superior income at this point, because he's got a Nexus done on the low ground, and he's got 26 workers versus 21. There is gonna be a Nexus here, proxied on the other side of the map. That's gonna be from that probe that also built those structures over there. Okay, it's gonna build a Nexus right next to the golden minerals. I like that. ShoWTimE not really getting too carried away here with the engagement. The thing is, he's playing against 5 different shield batteries. Good luck breaking that. It's not very easy to pull off. Obviously, you can try and just make more Stalkers and just point them all at a single target and try to shut it down before those shield batteries get the heal, but it's very easy to get too carried away, right? And then eventually overwhelmed by the opponent's economy. Alright, so. Oh, Stasis Ward attempted here. Lovely. Good reaction as well by ShoWTimE though. Doesn't really end up losing much. And he can obviously recall some of the probes as well from the main base towards this Nexus here on the right side of the map. Cybercore in a little bit of trouble. MaxPax though, slowly starting to outgrow the opponent here. Yeah, you can see this is like the first time where he gets that army advantage. Mostly just because he's had more income. He's going for a new gateway here as well. And he's managed to, yeah, he's managed to stabilize. Probes though, okay, did indeed get recalled here towards the golden minerals. And we'll have to keep an eye out here on the income advantage. It's been a bit of a roller coaster so far here for MaxPax, but now with the golden minerals being returned to the Nexus, as soon as this updates, we'll check it out again in just a little bit. But now with those golden minerals being returned to the Nexus, despite the fact that ShoWTimE has less workers here in total, he's gonna be able to make up for that difference. Yeah, I think we'll end up with a small advantage here for the German. Okay. Blink, coming right up. It's about halfway done right here. Cybercore, oh, we have a second one, okay, coming up here as well. Apparently MaxPax already accepting his fate with losing these units and structures here at the front. Blink is gonna be really powerful. Actually, the Oracle did just find this base, so that's a big catch right there for MaxPax, but luckily ShoWTimE did have a Stalker available there too. He's scouting though, ShoWTimE that is, the top left-hand corner, and he's maybe thinking about building another Nexus over there. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing it. Blink is gonna finish up here in just a moment for ShoWTimE. That allows him to move these Stalkers out of the main base as well if he wants to. Another pylon coming up in the top left. Yeah, you can see that the income is relatively even right now. Alright, MaxPax, the ball is in your court. I think it's about time for you to go for the engagement. That's exactly what he's doing right now. Prismatic alignment activated on the Void Rays as well to try and just deal as much damage to these armored units as possible. Battery overcharge, though, incredibly helpful. He decides to target it down. The battery does indeed fall. Probes coming in for the wraparound as well. Oracle moving forward to try and activate the Pulsar Beam, but I think that ShoWTimE just has more stuff. He's got more units. Most of the Void Rays have already disappeared. We're going to try and recall some of those units away. One of the Stalkers manages to sneak out, but that was a very expensive set of units to lose right there for MaxPax. I think this is gonna trigger, well, another Nexus on the other side of the map, but also a big engagement right here at the front. Luckily though, ooh, we have a double Twilight Council coming up. That's a mistake right here for MaxPax for sure, who's feeling the heat right now. He was not planning on losing all of those expensive units. Of course, he still has the 1 million shield batteries available. Battery overcharge may be a necessity, though, but it doesn't really matter all too much. There's enough firepower here in those red Stalkers to just pick off those heavy hitters one at a time. GG is cold. And it's ShoWTimE who obtains the victory in a fantastic series of Protoss versus Protoss.